Holt positioned himself on the elevated platform that had once been the temple's primary altar, the stone surface now cracked and blackened from the explosions that had brought down the ancient structure. From here, he had a commanding view of the battlefield, the burning remains of vampire civilization stretching across the twilight landscape of Volkmar Prime. His crimson quantum spurs cast blood-red light across the rubble as he checked his weapon's ammunition. 2 silver bullets remained, not nearly enough for what was coming. Movement in the ruins below caught his attention. 3 brief survivors emerged from the underground chambers, their yellow eyes blazing with fury as they spotted him on the altar. These weren't fleeing in terror like the others. These were coming for revenge, their ancient forms moving with predatory grace despite their wounds. "The Crimson Hunter," one of them hissed, its voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You have desecrated our most sacred ground." Holt raised his sidearm without bothering to respond. The first vampire lunged with inhuman speed, covering 30 meters in a heartbeat. The silver bullet took it in the chest, and it crashed into the altar's base with a shriek that echoed across the devastation. 1 round remaining. The second brief circled him warily, fangs extended, while the third attempted to flank from the opposite direction. These were older vampires, their scarification indicating millennia of experience. They had learned caution from watching their younger kin die. Holt's enhanced reflexes tracked both targets as they moved. When they finally coordinated their attack, he was ready. The remaining silver bullet found the second vampire's throat just as its claws raked across his armor. The impact sent him stumbling backward, but his armor held. The third vampire was on him before he could draw another weapon. They grappled at the edge of the altar, the creature's inhuman strength testing the limits of his powered armor. Claws screeched against hardened plates while fangs sought the vulnerable joints in his protection. Holt drove his armored fist into the vampire's throat, crushing cartilage, then followed up with an elbow strike that shattered its skull against the altar's stone surface. The ancient creature convulsed once and lay still. No silver bullets remained, but the immediate threat was ended. From his elevated position, Holt watched the larger battle continue to rage across Volkmar Prime. Civilian vessels swept low over temple complexes, their weapons carving through architecture that had stood for millennia. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers across the vampire homeworld, each one representing another victory for the hunters who had answered his call. His comm system suddenly crackled with excited Chinese voices as a formation of ships approached his position. The vessels bore the markings of various colonial militias, their hulls scarred from previous battles with brief raiders. Kanali Hongse de Guangmang, Shi Chuan Shua, Dang De Jiren, Umen Bai Shubang Juta. Holt didn't activate his translator. He had more pressing concerns than linguistic curiosity. But the intent was clear enough as the Chinese ships began landing near the temple ruins, disgorging armed colonists who moved to establish defensive positions around his altar platform. The lead group consisted of 20 fighters in military surplus armor, their weapons an eclectic mix of civilian and military hardware. Their commander, a scarred woman whose insignia marked her as militia rather than regular forces, approached the altar and offered a respectful bow. She spoke in heavily accented English. "Major Holt, I Colonel Wang of New Nanjing Colony. Vampires took all from us?" Holt nodded acknowledgement but kept his attention on the broader battle. More Chinese ships were landing across the battlefield, their crews joining the systematic destruction with the methodical efficiency of people who had personal reasons to hate the brief. "Vega here," came a transmission over the human tactical frequencies. "I've got vampire reinforcements moving toward grid 7-7. Looks like they're trying to—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Holt's sensors detected a massive explosion several kilometers to the north, where Malcolm Vega's mining vessel had been conducting operations against another temple complex. "Vega's down," reported another voice. "Direct hit from a brief ground battery. Ship's gone." Holt felt a flicker of something. Not grief exactly. He barely knew the miner. But Vega had been one of the first to answer the call, one of the original hunters who had understood what needed to be done. His death was a loss for the cause, another name to add to the tally of those who had fallen fighting monsters. Colonel Wang's forces had formed a defensive perimeter around the altar, their weapons trained on the approaches to Holt's position. Several wounded Chinese fighters were being treated by field medics, evidence that they had fought their way through significant brief resistance to reach this position. Above them all, the sky began to fill with new arrivals. Not the converted civilian vessels that had dominated the battle so far, but the sleek lines of proper military warships. Admiral Draculesti's 7th Fleet descended in perfect formation, their quantum drives casting regulation blue trails across the burning atmosphere. "All vessels in the Volkma system," came the Admiral's voice across all frequencies, cutting through the multilingual chatter. "This is Admiral Draculesti of the 7th Fleet. You are ordered to cease all hostile operations immediately and withdraw to minimum safe distance." The response was immediate and multilingual. English, Spanish, Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic, dozens of languages, as hundreds of civilian captains responded with variations of the same message. "No!" "Negative, Admiral," replied Captain Torres from her agricultural hauler. "We didn't come this far to let you bureaucrats save the vampires." "Je suis woman de Zhanjiang," shouted a Chinese militia commander. "Estos demonios deman morir," added a voice with a heavy Spanish accent. "All civilian vassals," Draculus continued, his voice tight with controlled frustration, "you are operating in violation of interstellar law. Withdraw immediately or face military intervention." From his altar platform, Holt watched the military formation begin to spread out, positioning their weapons to cover the civilian ships still engaged in the systematic destruction of brief facilities. The Admiral meant business. He was preparing to enforce his orders with firepower if necessary. But the civilians weren't backing down. If anything, the threat seemed to energize them. More ships landed on the surface, disgorging fighters who joined the ground operations. The Chinese contingent was particularly aggressive, their forces moving with the discipline of people who had learned to fight as a community against an existential threat. "Final warning," came Draculesti's voice. "All unauthorized vessels have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures. After that time, we will consider you hostile combatants interfering with official military operations." Holt activated his comm system, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice cut through the multilingual chaos with the authority of someone who had started this crusade. "Admiral, this is Major Elijah Holt. These people came here at my invitation. They stay until the job is done." A long silence followed his transmission. Then Draculesti's voice returned, carefully controlled. "Major Holt, you are ordered to surrender yourself to military custody for debriefing and evaluation. Your unauthorized actions have created an interstellar incident." "The only incident here is 35,624 human deaths," Holt replied. "We're settling that account today." Above, the military ships had completed their positioning, weapon systems powered up with the distinctive whine of charging energy banks. But Holt noticed something interesting. No targeting locks had been established. The Admiral was making threats he wasn't prepared to follow through on. Around the altar, Colonel Wang's forces tensed at their weapons. Across the battlefield, thousands of civilian fighters paused in their destruction to watch the confrontation develop. The Chinese forces in particular seemed to be coordinating through their own command structure, independent of both Holt and the Admiral. Then the first military fighters began their descent toward the surface. Sleek interceptors designed for atmospheric combat, their pilots following orders to establish landing zones for ground forces. They would try to physically separate the civilians from their targets to restore proper military order to what they saw as chaos. What they didn't understand was that this wasn't chaos at all. It was justice, pure and focused, delivered by people who had finally learned the true nature of their enemy. Holt's quantum spurs pulsed crimson as he watched the fighters approach. Around him, Colonel Wang's troops adjusted their weapons, tracking the incoming aircraft. Across the comm networks, civilian captains coordinated their responses in a dozen languages, united by common purpose despite their linguistic differences. And they chilled. The standoff was about to become a shooting war, human against human, with the dying vampire civilization burning between them. And at the center of it all stood Elijah Holt, the hunter who had sparked a crusade that military authority could neither control nor stop. The real battle was just beginning. Many thanks to channel member Wes Davies for making this video possible. Many thanks to my channel members and Pathfinders. You all make these videos possible. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.